All right, I'm now joined by our producer, Forrest Miller, Jacobin, deputy editor, Micah Uetricht, and Daniel, I believe, Muscles Bessner is what he's going by now.
Yeah, so weightlifting champion.
Yeah, well, you can tell. I mean, it's,
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, even with the you can tell. Yeah, so obviously, we're I asked you guys to come here, so I just want to start with Daniel. Is there a labor crisis in America? This is the anybody who doesn't remember this, who isn't very old. That was the clip of Krusty the Clown interviewing George Meany.
Yeah, it's so good, right? Because Krusty had like a serious interview show, like a Frost.
Exactly.
Like he was like a comedian who became like, so good. Is there a labor crisis in America?
Yeah. So, been doing the Scorsese series, interspersed with other things. So we did Good Casino before, and we are going to do Goodfellas today, these two, and also, Apocalypse Now, which we took a break from the series to do a couple weeks ago, all have something in common, which is that when I watch them, I find myself like realizing that I still had it all memorized from the number of times that I probably watched them between the ages of like 20 and 25. But I guess before we get into it and do the usual thing and kind of go through the movie a little bit, Muscles here actually has a personal connection to much of what's depicted in the movie. It's not that he has a background in organized crime, to be clear. That's not it. Maybe that too, but just in terms of where you grew up and all of that.
Karen is your aunt.
Yeah. So this movie is like literally a depiction of my world. So it takes place in basically outer South Brooklyn and Western Long Island, which is its own sort of cultural space. The way that I describe it is this would be basically second or third generation ethnic white, and I'm like fourth or fifth generation ethnic white. So these are basically the people, the most at this point, the part depicted the grandchildren of people who immigrated to America. And it's different when you go out west. There's a sort of whitening that takes place amongst Italians and Irish people and Polish people and Jews to a degree as well. And this movie depicts a world where there's still like real ethnic homogeneity, and that these people intertwine. There's still a sense of ethnic identity. And I think that's pretty unique in the American project. And so where Henry Hill grew up in East New York, it's now basically a black neighborhood, but at the time it was still a white ethnic neighborhood, mostly Italian and mostly Jews. And where Karen is from, the 5 towns of Long Island, that's literally where my parents live. And I grew up there. So like literally the diner that they go to was my childhood diner, the Sherwood Diner. And if you ever read Wise Guy, he talks about it. And the sort of long road where they do all the hijackings, that's like right by Kennedy Airport. That's 5 minutes from my house. So growing up, this movie was very formative. It was kind of like The Sopranos and The Godfather, where you don't know which came first. But me and my friends would always quote this movie. We'd say the lines, blah, 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 because it was literally our world. And it's funny to me that this very, very specific place has become sort of the synecdotal for American gangster films, because it's so weird. And I'll stop talking. But one thing I hope that we address is sort of the labor politics of the mafia. Yeah. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And I should say also, I think the ethnic point is interesting because something, I know Forrest knows The Sopranos. So something I'm sure you noticed and thought about, since the actress who plays Henry's wife, Karen, in this movie was obviously Dr. Melfi, Tony's therapist in The Sopranos. And it's kind of funny that in Goodfellas, it's a plot point that she's Jewish and not Italian. And in The Sopranos, it's a plot point that she's Italian and not Jewish, because at the beginning of the show, there's a line where she asks why he picked her as his psychiatrist. And he says, because they gave me a choice between 3 Jews and a Paisan.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more overlap than that, even. I mean, Tony Sirico, who plays Paulie Walnuts, is in the very first scene.
I never noticed how much he's in like the first 20 minutes of it. He's like Tootie's like right hand man or something. Like when they beat up the mailman, he's in that part. When the kid that's supposed to be like that grows up into Joe Pesci runs into the thing to say that Henry's gotten arrested, he's sitting playing cards inside of the bar. Like he's in pretty much every scene in the first 20 minutes and then never appears again.
Yeah, and just speaking about the kid who plays Joe Pesci, I was actually at a restaurant where he was the waiter, Clemente's Clam House, and on Flatbush Avenue, yeah, right by King's Plaza. So it's like really it depicts this world and it's very, very well.
Yeah, and actually speaking of that world, since since Paulie Walnuts, Tony Sirico was mentioned, I do have to play just a minute of this. It's a long clip, but I'll just play the first minute because just unrelated to this, somebody happened to send me this clip today of a interview with Tony Sirico from 1989.
In my life, and I pay for them. I did a couple armed robberies in my life, and I pay for them. I did what I had to do.
Did you ever go to jail?
Yeah,
How many times?
a few times.
Did you kill?
Did I what?
I guess that was crossing a line to ask that in an interview. I don't know. Maybe
Michael made this point back when they first launched Talking Sopranos, where he was talking about how there's like a stark difference between, and this is, I feel like Goodfellas is where this started. Like there's the two kinds of mob actors. There's the people that are like classically trained actors that go into it like really wanting to take this seriously, and then there's just kind of like assorted mob guys that hang out both in the Sopranos and every single Goodfellas, or every single Scorsese movie. They're kind of just there. And I feel like The Sopranos just kind of took a lot of the actors from Scorsese movies that were like kind of just the background like mob guys and put them into starring roles.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and so of course also most obviously the Michael Imperioli who plays Christopher Moltisanti in The Sopranos is Spider in this, who is
he falls into the very classically trained like acting school actor side of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that comes out really hard if you listen to Talking Sopranos. Like,
yeah,
the contrast between him and Sharip is pretty extreme. Like, I mean, whatever. He's a very good actor. You wouldn't guess, but like, he's this like kind of like refined like New York theater guy, and and Sharip comes from the other end. But
I was watching the Steve Buscemi interview that they did pretty recently, like a couple weeks ago, and he was like talking like in depth to Steve Buscemi about like the acting professors they had, like the teachers, the classes they went to, all the stuff, and then Bobby Bacalari, like Steve Sharip, was just like, I bet he fucking hates De Niro too. Fuck that guy or something like, and that's like the most stark example of that breach, I guess, that bridge between the mob world and the acting world.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess like the way that this movie, does it is, right from the very beginning. And again, like I've seen this movie many, many times, but it was the first time in, I don't know, decade, more than that, that I'd seen it. So, one of the things that was hitting me, and, again, as is our custom here, we're just going to spoil the shit out of this movie. So like, if you haven't seen it, know that, coming into it, but right from the very beginning, they're really doing like the things that like movies and TV shows about the mob so often do, like, which are both like give you a little bit of lifestyle porn, like, wouldn't this be awesome, to be able to live like these guys, and also make you feel uncomfortable for the first thing by showing you what sociopathic killers they are. And this one really does hits both of those hard right at the beginning, right at like the first moments of the movie, because the very first thing you see is them going that like driving down the street. Somebody commented, before we went live about it being the broiest movie of all time, and there's a, there is something there because like you see them in the car, and like just the vibe is like anybody who just like, I mean, anybody who's ever like just been in the car with a bunch of their guy friends after like a hard night of drinking at like, like the wee hours of the morning recognizes that scene, the way they're all kind of slumped in the car and the general vibe of it, except that then like something starts making noise in the trunk and it's the guy they killed and he's, or thought they killed and he's still alive and that they have to finish murdering him. And then immediately after that, it goes into this whole kind of glossy, romanticized riff about how I always wanted to be a gangster.
They have it's kind of the nostalgia about the old neighborhood too. Like, I don't know, like he's running around, like burning the cars and like helping out with stuff. And even though his dad's beating him, like, he's like, everyone takes a beating sometimes. Like there's that, like, it's almost shot. It's like shot in an extremely nostalgic way too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and especially, of course, it's Scorsese, so I mean, the soundtrack is like much more at the front of your consciousness while watching the movie than it would be with a lot of other filmmakers.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that are important here, and I think it's important to understand who Scorsese is, because this is not Scorsese's world, and it's not De Niro's world. The Scorsese and De Niro were both from Manhattan. So these I think, are more déclassé, sort of same generation, same age. I think Henry Hill is actually born 1 year after Scorsese, or 1 year before. They're within 1 year of each other. And so it's also Scorsese sort of imagining a type of life that he never really had and reflecting on that as he enters middle age. And so there's this whole boomer politics to it. And just one Micah hasn't chatted yet, so I just want to say one thing. I've been talking too much, but I actually, my girlfriend's stepfather was actually the music editor at Goodfellas.
Oh, wow.
And talking about how like Scorsese like knew exactly, he had the soundtrack, before anything started filming. And so he said it was one of the easiest jobs because Scorsese like had the visual language in tune with the music. And this movie is so influential. The way that I think of it, it's this very liminal movie between sort of like the late 90s super fast MTV editing and the sort of the 70s, 80s generation of movies, right? It's a faster edit than you would get 5 years earlier, but it's slower than what it becomes, but it doesn't feel aged because I think the quick editing allows it to like feel relevant to people our age and younger. And I think that's really critical to highlight. What's her name? Schoonmaker. Is like he works very closely with his editor, something with a T, Schoonmaker, who's very important to, I think, Scorsese's success.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's one of those rare soundtracks that you can just listen to the actual soundtrack too. And and you can just like because I have a friend that used to, before parties, like play the Goodfellas soundtrack.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that. And yeah, especially if you've seen the movie a bunch of times, it's got an interesting, experience to do that. So we go through the like the arc about Henry hooking up with the mafia and being at that point, he's obviously the lowest level wise guy, but he's like but he's a beloved one already. And it kind of that little arc of him going away from his, the life that he's supposed to have with going to school. There's a thing that's played in a way. I mean, obviously it's horrific, but it's kind of funny with the post office and, making brutalizing, this poor postman. So he doesn't bring letters from the school, to let his dad know that, that he's, that he's been truant, that he's missed, 200 days of school or something. And
can I just say, to interject there, that was the scene where clearly Scorsese is trying to do this like nostalgia piece of the movie, and look at the old neighborhood and whatever. But watching that, I'm reminded of why no one should be nostalgic for these kinds of days where the world was like that cloistered and like the pining for like community of old. I mean, clearly there are some aspects of it in our hyper neoliberalized, hyper individualized society where we're like, yes, I would like to like have more connection with my neighbors, and if your sort of ethnicity has been sort of beaten out of you in favor of this just blob of whiteness that is the experience of almost all white immigrants to the United States, then you have some kind of nostalgia for seeing that kind of thing. But also, like, to continue those old worlds means like the mailman gets his ass beat through no fault of his own. Like, that's part of what that also means when that world remains that cloistered, and you've got these enforcers of arbitrary rules that, like, the mailman's just trying to carry out his bureaucratic function in a well-functioning society, and these guys are just like, no, you're not going to do that. So now you have to watch for any letters that come from the school.
Yeah, I think, Micah, that's so important, because I think what Henry gets at this a little bit when he says the mafia is police for wise guys, but what it really is, and what it emerged as in Sicily, is an alternative state structure. Right? It's not a surprise that it emerged in Sicily, an incredibly decentralized part of Italy, an already decentralized state. So you have there essentially an alternative state structure fighting against the major state structure. And I think that's what got it there. And interestingly enough, I think the current theory on why the mafia arose was to regulate the citrus industry because it was so big in terms of sailors in like the 19th century that you needed like a structure to manage this sort of export-import of Sicilian citrus. And that's like the theory on why it arose and how it was transposed to the United States. It's kind of an interesting thing. There's a famous article about it. Anyone who wants to look it up. It's an interesting origin of it.
Well, it's also interesting. He says it's the police for people that can't go to the police, which aren't necessarily wise guys. It's just like shop owners in these poor neighborhoods that maybe are doing something, illegal on the side, or, they have like a mob person that they're paying off to avoid other mob people. So it's kind of like they're thrown into the situation where there's no winning, but it also is that the state has failed them in that sense. You know what I mean? Like, they're living in these immigrant neighborhoods that the police aren't necessarily going in and trying to protect every business. So you hire these people as protection, and then they end up being the ones that drain you of your money for that.
Yeah, and not to open up a huge can of worms here, but we should keep this in mind. When people say things like abolish the police, many of them have a well thought out vision for what abolishing the police should look like. But at least some people do, right? But this can be what abolishing the police looks like, is that you create these like you just get police by a different name in a way that is not a sort of a bureaucratized and regulated way of doing policing.
No, totally. I think that's absolutely right. I think this is something in general that I wish that that radical leftists thought more about. That there are obviously various problems with centralized states, but like what arises in the absence of them can often be much worse.
I have the solution. You just want the good parts of the centralized state without the bad parts.
Why didn't I think of that?
The solution for everything. Get the good parts, don't get the bad parts. Unfortunately, in our society, we have only the bad parts.
Yeah. Okay.
We don't have the welfare state.
So if I'm following this correctly, I want to make sure that I've got Dr. Bessner's line of argument here down. We should have the good things. We shouldn't have the bad things.
That's where it is.
Okay.
I'd buy into that. Hey.
But it's interesting that you talk about the American state, because have you guys ever read the book? This is based on the Nicholas Pileggi book, Wise Guy.
No.
Read it. It's really interesting because Henry in real life actually gets to start as a real criminal, is in the military. He joins the military at some point in the 50s and early 60s, and he basically becomes like a front for all of these officers moving illicit contraband. So it's interesting that they cut that out, because the military, again, I'm obsessed with this. This is a movie about American militarism, because where do they do the Lufthansa heist, and all their heists are service members' money being exchanged through Idlewild Airport.
Right.
So this is a hub of currency, because America is building this military, and you have this sort of localized alternative state structure taking advantage of the military. And I think Scorsese could have hit that home, but like the boomers, he kind of likes the military. It's kind of a
well, it's interesting. I watched that documentary that I was talking about before we went on. That was kind of like the TV documentary of Henry Hill's life. That it had Scorsese and it had Nicholas Pileggi, the guy that wrote the original Wise Guys book, and they're talking about the military part of his, like, that part of his life, but they don't talk about it like that. They talk about it as if like he's trying to get away from his life of crime, and he just ends up finding more crime. So they kind of like glossed over that in that.
Well, actually, so I do have one thing I'm very curious about the book, because somebody pointed this out in chat a few minutes ago, and I realized this had never occurred to me before, but it's like a really interesting point that, and I'm trying to like run back the movie in my head to see if this is completely true, but you never quite see Henry Hill kill anybody in this movie.
You don't.
Yeah, which is interesting.
He's a witness to violence.
No, he's always like a bystander, kind of an accomplice, but like it's interesting that they never quite show him killing anybody. And I wonder if that's like if that's because like when this was made, this is a guy who was there and like maybe that was his like red line, like no depicting me murdering people.
I mean, I'm sure he couldn't admit to murdering people in the book because that is doesn't have a statute of limitations. But the one piece of violence you do see Henry do is like the justified protecting women violence. Right. Henry's a woman protector.
Right.
A very deliberate choice.
Yeah.
Henry's innocent in this movie, not like he was in real life.
Yeah. I mean,
well, the interesting thing about the actual Billy Batts murder, that kind of pushes him into fully being committed to. Let's. Well, I'm saying in real life, the interesting thing is that it took place at his bar, so he was kind of stuck being a part of it because he was trying to legitimately like in the mob style run a bar, and they kind of ended up just murdering somebody in the bar, and he had to go with them and bury the body outside. So that's kind of like his push into like fully being, like a mob associate, I guess.
Right. He's never in the mob, which is really interesting. What I love about this movie is that it's not any, like all the movies are about the people who are like officially in the mob, but these are the people who actually like are the workers of the mob. This is like a working class mafia movie in a real way, because these are people who will never be part of the official mob. They're just like petty criminals. They're constantly running hustles. I mean, the movie doesn't really even have an overarching plot, right? It's essentially a series of sketches from crime to crime to crime, from set piece to set piece to set piece, which makes it appear kind of like a trailer. And I believe my friend David Parsons pointed this out to me, but I think Scorsese has an interview where he said he wanted the movie to feel like a trailer. And it does feel like a trailer, which is why it's so excited. There's no real rise and fall arc, but not really plot.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. Like, I think that, I mean, I totally see what you mean. I guess watching it this time, I did see a few through lines that I hadn't like really thought about that much before. So we said this early thing where he gets the job at the cab stand, he drops out of school, he becomes more and more involved in the mafia. Although, as you say, never as a full member.
We talked about that with the Casino. We kind of went through that was kind of the highest ranking mafia. Because they're actually, well, at least Joe Pesci in that movie actually is in the mob,
right?
And then this is kind of like the next level down of people that are kind of just working for people that are working for a crew.
Totally right. And then if you watch watch Mean Streets, which I think was Scorsese's first gangster movie, the gangsters in there are like definitely like a level or two below the guys. Like the guys in Goodfellas are like middle management. They're like bottom of the barrel, like sometimes corrupt cops shake them down kind of gangsters.
Yeah.
Or it's not even middle management, right? It's like this is the trickle down effect of what the mob is doing. It like creates these further down the chain. It creates opportunities for people like the characters depicted in Goodfellas to do whatever they decide to do.
And of course, the interesting that Scorsese keeps hitting throughout this is the fact that all of these immigrant groups are kind of interconnected. But if you're not fully Italian, the mob doesn't trust you in the same way. I mean, not that they trust anybody, but they don't trust you.
But you literally can't be a member
if
you're not Italian on both sides, going all the way back. So the explanation they give is so they could trace your ancestry back to Italy to make sure there are no vendettas, that are relevant, that, you have some ancestral beef with somebody else who's also in the mafia.
Well, there's also the spider thing where, like, if someone in your family is an informant, is kind of the assumption is that you're also at some point going to be an informant. It almost taints your blood.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, that's Joe Pesci's excuse when that happens. So, yeah, in the movie, so this early arc with Henry's childhood culminates the first time he's ever busted, and then, like, this is something that's very, like, this is the beginning of, like, something that really struck me this time watching it is there's a crazy amount of foreshadowing about how it ends. That there's so much stuff throughout the movie about how bad it is to inform on the mob and how that's the worst thing you could possibly do. And
never rat on your friends.
Yeah, keep your mouth shut. Yeah, you're not mad at me. I got busted. No, you learn the two most important things in your life: keep your mouth shut and never rat on your friends. Which
every
one thing said twice.
Every older like Italian American like stepdad and uncle, I feel like, has like a boomer meme of like a really like low resolution style picture of De Niro on their Facebook page that says "Never rat on your friends."
That's not bad advice for leftists who get arrested by the cops. Either.
No, I mean, look, that is the objectively correct advice to give anybody who's arrested. Certainly for political stuff.
What's always so interesting to me, particularly about looking at these figures historically, is that, like, members of organized crime have such a strange relationship to the American state because oftentimes they're extremely patriotic while at the same time being criminals. So the paradigmatic example to me is, you guys know Meyer Lansky, who founded with Lucky Luciano. One of his kids went to West Point, and so there are these really weird, the really strange relationship that organized crime members have to the American state is something that's always struck me as compelling and sort of example of the tensions of American patriotism in the 20th century.
Well, there's also the thing that, and this actually happened, they pointed out in The Sopranos, which is that, actual mob members like protected the ports during the war in various American cities.
And also JFK.
Yeah, although I like the right. So of course there's always the thing about the mob killing JFK, and there's like what was like one of the Giancana or somebody, one of his was whichever one it was, like said like that was like his last words were like, we never should have done Kennedy. But I like the point they made about this on Chapo that, like, yeah, but come on, like, these guys lie all the time, right? What would be something you could say in your end of your life to make you sound cooler than that, right? That I whacked the president, that's so you should probably take that with a grain of salt. But after we see Henry as a, we switch to Henry as an adult and his relationship with the Joe Pesci character. And really, like, so much of this movie also, another one of the big through lines is that he knows that Lost Daniel. All right. He knows that that Pesci, is a lunatic and that he's dangerous and he can't be trusted. And, this is made extremely clear many times, in this section of the movie. But, like, at a certain point, it almost starts to feel like watching, like, Uncut Gems and thinking it's like, oh, God damn it, is he going to make another bet that, he knows this, right? Like, a very early scene in the movie, in the part of the movie where he's an adult, is the Pesci character getting, like, acting like he's going to kill Henry for saying that, for saying that he's a funny guy, right? Like that, that's one of the things people always remember from this movie. What do you mean? I'm a clown. I'm here to amuse you. But
what he says. He's a big boy.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like the most tense, like 30 seconds.
Oh my God, I hate watching it. I'm just like, But that's going to come back. I mean, the first time you watch it, that you're going to see Joe Pesci doing the same thing, like in different ways, all of which are going to be uncomfortable. Because that trope of Pesci acting like that is the constant throughout the movie, right? And you're just like, why are you doing this?
Well, yeah, totally, right. And yeah, in that particular case, because it's Henry, and and because the way it's handled, I mean, honestly, sorry, I'm blanking. What's the name of Pesci's character?
Tommy.
Thank you.
Tommy
yes, yeah, because Tommy is the way he is. I mean, honestly, I don't even think it's impossible in that scene that if things had gone, sideways somehow,
or he felt disrespected at all.
Yeah, like he would have. It seems entirely possible that there was a version of that scene where Henry got like a little too pissed off at him, and then Tommy was offended by that, and then like somebody ended up getting killed. Like that seems like totally within the realm of possibility.
After that, he goes after both Larry Boy from The Sopranos, who's the guy that owns the restaurant, and the waiter there. You know what I mean? Like he's kind of looking for trouble the entire time that he's in that restaurant. He's trying to show off. And the fact that Henry kind of like looks scared is kind of what I think backs him off.
Yeah, totally. Because it's basically the same thing later in the movie when he kills Spider for telling him to go fuck himself. I think that was Spider's capital offense at the end. After, by the way, he'd shot Spider in the foot for being too slow with the drinks.
You're looking for sympathy. Is that it, sweetie?
What also something really funny, I don't know if this means anything, but in that scene, the famous "What's So Funny About Me" scene, they're supposed to be 22. Like in life, they're like 22, 23. Joe Pesci looks like he's 95. So I think like there's something, I understand why Scorsese did, but there's something missed because these guys are like super young, super young toughs. And that's a little, it didn't ring right to me. They look like middle managers a little bit. They should be kids, because it's the kids who are really running all the like crime on the street, whereas like Paulie is not. His hands aren't near anything until Rico, and that's what winds up getting him. But I always thought that was interesting, and it kind of foreshadows The Irishman with this sort of.
I was going to say because that's what everybody didn't like about the movie, because in that case, by the time he got to The Irishman, Scorsese didn't want to do that. He was self-conscious about it, instead of just having a movie. Because like the Goodfellas problem, the movie takes place over the course of decades, but they don't really, they kind of seem to be the same age the whole time. That he tried to solve that in The Irishman, with visual effects to de-age them, and it turned out that was way worse. I like The Irishman. I think it's a good movie. By the way, when we do The Irishman, we should try to get Dina Gostella to come on the. To come on the stream, talk about the Teamster stuff.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well,
we talked about it with Casino too, though. The same kind of thing where at the end of it, they have De Niro just wearing the big glasses, and they're like his version of like, an aged De Niro is that his glasses are like a lot bigger and like shaped weirdly.
Yeah, which whatever. I mean, like it's probably the best, the best thing you could do. Since if you try to do the visual effects, it's going to look weird, and if you don't do anything, that's going to be strange. But yeah. So, and this is a thing again throughout the movie, like especially after. I mean, I guess just to run through this really quickly, like in the most basic sense, the big there's the initial. Section of the movie leading up to him getting busted the first time, and then there's basically a section leading to when he goes to prison for real, and then there's great stuff in prison, and then we get out of he gets out of prison, and then the next big chunk of the movie is kind of that going into him getting more and more into the drug stuff, both using and selling. And then that both getting him busted in a way that's going to be much more serious than it was before, and also being, cut loose by the mafia, so he has to become an informer at the end. And when he gets out of prison, and the prison stuff is fantastic. Like this is always what a thing, I love that, like something about that image of how they've got like the prison, like all around, like first that like when he goes to prison, he's like, doing shots in the bar with his friends, and and his wife is there in the fur coat, and he's like, "Oh, take me to jail." And then he goes
the whole handful of pills.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
That was just one of the first times
okay,
you're not really paying attention to it at that point of the movie, but you're starting to get a sense of, and yeah, I think it was even before this when they. So I guess I should also say one of the big pivot points in the movie is when they do something that's actually considered a serious crime in the mafia, which is killing a made guy, which you're not allowed to do, at all if you're not a made guy, and even in general you're not. It's like it's like having tenure. They can fire you, but you need to have a sit down and a good reason. And it's, which actually goes to Daniel's point about the labor politics, because that's definitely the difference, that all of these guys are essentially like at-will employees, and at-will employees, like, for even being alive, that not only can they be cut loose with nothing but a little handful of cash, and now I've got to turn your back, like nothing, but they can be killed like nothing. It's not a big deal. It's fine. You can do that. But they kill Made Guy. It's basically one of the 3 scenes in the movie that works out this way. So one of them is the "what you think I'm a clown, I'm here to amuse you" scene we were talking about. And that one, it's a near miss, but nothing happens. One of them is the spider scene, which is fine because Spider has no status in the mafia, so you can just kill him. And like the only consequences for that is that like they yell at Tommy that like, this was this crazy thing to do, and he'll have to dig his own hole. Like that's
Spider's an actor.
Yeah, exactly.
Presumably Spider's status is the same as theirs was in the beginning when he's working at the cab stand. Like assumably Spider is kind of a mirror to that.
Yeah,
that's what I thought when he enters the scene. I mean, he kind of has this like boyish. He just clearly is very like nervous in being there. He's just sort of like glad that the big kids are letting him be around the table, right. And you see the sort of totally randomness with which somebody like that can be executed for no reason at all, for a thing that you would think that the mafia guys would be appreciative of. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, this is what's part of what's so great about that scene is like De Niro is busting Pesci's balls there, and he's like, oh, you gotta let him talk to you like that, and Pesci ends up killing him, right? But like he was like, wait, this isn't how this interaction is supposed to go. We're supposed to admire this kid for having the balls to push back against you. You're not supposed to shoot him. We're just supposed to go through this ritual of where we all bust your balls. But Pesci, because of Pesci's out of control toxic masculinity, it just he takes it over the top.
Well, yeah. He's sociopathic to a point where even the other sociopath,
like he's a sociopath to the point that's not even okay in the mafia.
Yeah,
like that's he's at that level.
And even not with De Niro, who kind of is also like De Niro has no qualms about also murdering Billy Batts with Joe Pesci in that scene, which I guess in real life kind of had more of a backstory to it, where it was De Niro's character who originally wanted to kill Billy Batts, and it kind of just escalated. But they kind of allude to it, but they don't really allude to it in the movie. But it's kind of like he's pushed it so far past the point of like even De Niro's character is like, whoa, like,
Yeah, no, totally, right. So that's the and this is the thing, right? Like after Hedrick gets out of prison, Paul even tries to tell him what's wrong with you, right? Like you got to stop working with Tommy. He's crazy and unreliable. And he's like, oh no, I only use him for certain things. And then again, it's the uncut gems thing. He just goes right back to working closely with Tommy. Nothing. There's no pause. There's no hiccup there.
And they play it for laughs too, because like it's literally like it's that jump cut, and then the next scene, he's like, I brought them in with me to sell these drugs for my Pittsburgh connections.
But yeah, that's the thing. It's like it's he's a sociopath to the point that it's bad for business. Somebody said,
and
that's exactly
another thing that's important to add is that in the book, at least, you see that his smuggling in prison is directly shaped by his smuggling for the U.S. military. So there are all these connections that aren't drawn out. And I think also from the book, if I remember correctly, is that the spider in real life was developmentally disabled. So I think it was another like even worse, even worse, taking killing someone who doesn't like even know what like kind of is a little bit more of an innocence. And there's a cultic aspect to the movie too that Karen talks about, how where they only hang out with each other, and I think is very similar to DSA. But no, but it's but how it becomes like this. It's basically a movie of a subculture,
right?
So it probably has a lot to teach to the American left, about how to not be a subculture and eating your own, as the mafia eventually does.
Yeah.
Well, outsiders are too problematic. They're going to get
canceled. No outsiders ever, right? Yeah.
Well, the other thing would be to say, okay, if you spot a Joe Pesci in your organization, you gotta take care of that. And I don't mean like take care of that in the Goodfellas sense, but you got to get that person out of the scene because it's not going to end well.
Stop doing jobs with them. That's
exactly.
No, that's right.
Can't be your chapter chair of your DSA chapter.
Yeah, and so there are the three times that Tommy being Tommy plays out, right? There's the near miss with Henry, and you think you're a funny guy. There's killing Spider the adjunct. It's not a big deal because he's just an adjunct. And then there's killing Billy Bass, which is a very big deal because that's the one thing that you can't do. And the way it's played, again, I understand. Forrest has been said this isn't like quite what happened, but the in the movie it's on the level of stupid of the Spider thing or the you're a funny guy thing. It's just that he referred to the fact that earlier in his life Tommy would shine shoes, and then Tommy got a
fucking shine box.
yeah, and then he like doubled down on it because whatever. I mean, he's a gangster, just got out of prison. He's an asshole. So it says, now, right? They like make up, right? He's like, hey, if I, he refers to the shoe shines. Tommy gets ruffled about it. He said, and Tommy's like, oh, why you got to be breaking balls here? It's like, no, I'm not breaking balls. If I want to break balls, I'd say, go get your shine box. And then they make up for it. And then after they make up for it, he has to get the one last little dig in, go get your fucking shine box. And then they kill him for it. And this then leads to, because none of them have tenure, that's why Pesci is killed in the end. They tell him that they're finally going to make him a made guy, but then they just kill him, and everybody has to stand still for it. There's nothing that can be done, and then we go into this really intense scene, or sequence of scenes, I guess, but this really intense sequence at the end. All said in one day, as Henry is just coked to the gills, sweaty.
As we're getting to this, there's like literally a helicopter somehow flying low over my house that I can hear it. I don't know if you can hear it right now. It's like literally shaking my living room.
I just think it's also important to emphasize that this is one of the rare movies that is basically perfect. There's like no downtime.
Right.
One of the last sequences is one of the most famous sequences in movie history. It's just such an artistic accomplishment, and just in terms of pure entertainment, to have a movie that doesn't lull, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Without really exhausting you either. I didn't feel exhausted.
No, it's a 2.5 hour movie that, like Danny said earlier, doesn't have a like super obvious plot structure, but like it's very tight. It goes very quickly. It's you never feel like you've been watching a movie for a long time. There's forward motion the entire time. And it's, again, I think in a way, like, despite the fact that it has that, that on one level, it's mostly this montage of individual crimes. It still feels like it's all very tightly packed together and is telling one story the entire time. By the way, I know somebody in the chat says, has anyone discussed how Goodfellas is somewhat of a Christmas movie? I know I have recently because I was talking about it with my little brother when we were watching it. But But yeah, no, key part of the movie is set around.
No, it's not just a Christmas movie, because you remember the scene where he brings the Christmas tree home and he says, "Karen, I got the most expensive tree they had," and then he says, I think he says "Merry Christmas," and then he hands her a wad of bills, and he also says "Happy Hanukkah."
Okay, so it's also a Hanukkah movie. That's right.
Yeah, it's a great Hanukkah movie. Exactly.
Yeah, really one of the great
Hanukkah movie.
Oh, it's also, you know, it's a bunch of crimes like sewn together, but it's a character sketch. Is basically what it is. You know what I mean? Like you're building into, so like the things have to go through all together, because his downfall in the end has to stem from pretty much everything that, you know, had happened before that, because you're kind of just building a character up till the end of his, you know, till he turns.
Yeah, no, for sure, and yeah, like and the way that it does turn at the end, you know, when they sour on it again, lots of the same way they foreshadow the hell out of him becoming an informer at the end. They spend a lot of time foreshadowing him being getting to a point at the end where he'd be afraid that they just kill him because they were afraid that he would become an informer, which is why he becomes an informer. It's completely, you know, I could make analogies here to the left here also, but it's one of these things, you know, you do it because you falsely think somebody's going to do something that then makes them actually do it.
I have to say that whenever I watch a movie like this or Uncut Gems or basically any gangster movie, the downfall of the main character is usually that they sort of get greedy, that they realize that they could, you know, they're making X, but it maybe if they start dealing coke, they can make like 5X. You know, like they can. But X was pretty good. Like X was a good life. You didn't have to go above X, and it's probably my conservative Midwestern temperament. But I'm watching these movies, and I'm like, just don't do it. Just stick with X. Like, don't just leave the coke out of it. Like you're living a very you're high on the hog. You're going to the Copacabana. They're bringing in the table for you. Like what more do you want? Just be happy. You don't need to go this extra mile. It's just going to end in ruin. Let somebody else do that. And then you can, you know, just leave a comfortable, like upper middle class gangster lifestyle.
Yeah, totally. I mean, especially because after he gets out of prison, you know, Paulie, you know, who is, you know, at least essentially the boss of everybody, you know, in the movie, gives him an out. Right? He's like, look, I know that you've been selling drugs, but you were in prison. You did what you had to do, but just stop. Right?
Whenever I get those interventions in my life, I'm like, yeah, you're fucking right. I really should not be doing that. I'm going to straighten up and fly right at this point. I'm sorry. What was I even thinking?
No, that is what happened. You know, when I remember that when, you know, when me and Bhaskar and Megan Day like had to stop you from selling coke. So yeah, that was
not out of the Jacobin office building.
Well, but when I was an associate editor, Bhaskar's like, okay, that's fine. But now that you're the deputy editor,
that's right. God, stop. Very least nowhere near the office. Yeah. Yeah. No.
At least not in Jacobin baggies. Like, you know.
Don't put it in the new issues that we're mailing to our members. Just keep it separate.
People want to read it for the articles. You don't need to add a little extra in there.
Yeah. Lifetime subscribers maybe, but yeah. Yeah, so you know, because after the Lufthansa heist, then basically Jimmy De Niro's character kills everybody, you know, who was involved essentially, except for Henry, because he trusts him, you know, to just like not get greedy and also not talk. And then
it's not just that he trusts him, it's that Henry isn't involved in the actual heist. He doesn't see any part of it. You know what I mean? Like he gets the money and, you know, after the fact, but all he did is tip him off. He was the go-between between Maury, I'm pretty sure, and De Niro's character.
Yeah. Somebody asked in the chat, by the way, is this more realistic than The Godfather? Very, very, very much so. Like I love The Godfather. I think it's like one of the best movies that's ever been made. But like, I think, you know, my strong sense is that this is about 10,000 times more like what actual organized crime is like.
Well, I mean, The Godfather is pretty much like you're watching a CEO or something of like a large company. Like The Godfather is like if you were watching like Jeff Bezos go about his daily life, like one of the biggest like corporations in the country. But like it's someone that actually works for Amazon in the warehouse. Like their life isn't going to be anything like that. Like you know what I mean? Or someone that's even like a floor manager at a warehouse or something. Their life isn't anything like that. So you're kind of, I mean, The Godfather is kind of the pinnacle of. Like it's really romantic because of course like it's the highest echelon of like the richest people. Right. Like Michael Corleone is not someone that works his way up anywhere.
Yeah, right. I mean, he just inherits it.
Yeah, he's kind of the fail son of the at first anyway.
Yeah, fair enough. Micah has to stuff some blow in guillotine baggies, but he'll be right back. Oh my God, yeah, somebody mentioned in the chat Donnie Brasco, which I actually watched with Michael Brooks a few months before I died, but it's a good movie, very different, but it's a good movie.
Just thinking about the scene. I was watching it the other day when they're like, "What's forget about it?" And he's like and he's like, when you want to just draw something, forget about it. And
Wow. So Warren, thank you for the super chat. Says Edward McDonald played himself and is a friend of my family. He was the U.S. attorney who put the real Henry Hill into witness protection. All right.
He was in that documentary too, that I watched, the Henry Hill documentary. It was a shitty TV documentary, but it has Scorsese.
Yeah, I'd still be kind of interested in seeing that because I've seen Goodfellas so many times. It'd be interesting to see the.
He's definitely he's not as glamorous as like a Ray Liotta character. He's kind of just a tweaky, like, I don't know. He looks like anyone you could run into at like a dive bar. That's kind of.
Yeah. Although conversely, somebody in the chat said Tommy, who Joe Pesci plays, like the real guy was 6'4".
He also had a mustache and like he looked like a baseball player.
Yeah, I think Tommy is based on a few different people, right? Because he was also, the real guy is Paul Vario, and I think Henry really did a lot of stuff with Paul Vario's son, which also provided him with a closer connection to like someone who's actually in the mob than is suggested in the movie. But they decided to cut that character out. And actually, Henry, the thing that he did that's most famous is the Boston point shaving scandal, where he and two basketball players from Boston College or BU, I forget which one, I think BC, wound up going to jail because Henry had organized this like big. So the movie doesn't. I recommend the book. The book is really good.
One of them.
There should be a follow-up.
One of them testified too and put. Yeah.
What do you say, Micah?
We should have a follow-up to this movie. I didn't even know about the point shaving thing, but you see in the final after the movie's over, and there's the text at the end that he was busted for selling coke while he was in the witness protection program.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they did mention that in the titles at the end, and the way they present at the end of the movie is like, okay, so he was busted for selling drugs and witness protection, but he's clean now. Like it's like it seems like a sort of forced thing to give him.
If you watch that documentary, he also ended up getting busted, like right either before or after they made the documentary for he had a bunch of drugs in his airplane bag, and like whatever friend that he has or neighbor at the time, like he's at that point he's so far gone that he like hasn't been sober in years, and they're talking about like his struggles with drug and alcohol abuse his entire life, and then I guess he got busted for like just putting drugs in the airline bag and getting on the plane.
Yeah, no, we should do we should all read Wise Guide. We should do a follow-up. That'd be fun.
That'd be really fun. He also, I don't know if you guys remember this, it might have just been a New York thing, but he became a character on the Howard Stern show in the 90s. He would like constantly call into Howard Stern. It was really funny. There's some probably good clips out there with Henry calling into Howard.
Have you ever heard the by the way, that reminds me, have you ever heard the clip of Bernie on Howard Stern?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, like it was like this random thing in the 90s that there was some like that there was some bill that would have made it easier to like censor radio or something.
Yeah.
And so Bernie went on Howard Stern to denounce the bill.
He called Bernie his hero or something at one point when he ran the first time.
Yeah. Howard's politics seem to have really declined since then, but that's.
I don't think I think it's his acceptance into like getting people like Hillary Clinton to come on his show.
Yeah. You were saying
I want to see that clip just because I have 75% feeling that would be like the purest Bernie, where he would just have to say something and be like, well, Howard, I don't know much about the Sibian, but I do know a little bit of something about Medicare for All. He would just do the Bernie skirt.
I like these bongos, Howard, but
No, but what I was going to say previously, though, when we were talking about all this stuff that I didn't know about Henry Hill, that in the movie, he's always playing, as we've said, he's the peacemaker. We never see him actually kill anybody, whatever. But the fact that he's doing all this, the point shaving stuff, he's still dealing coke, even though he's in the witness protection program. He wants to get on Howard Stern. I mean, that seems to indicate that rather than playing that kind of like peacemaker role, he's much more like Adam Sandler's character in Uncut Gems. Like, he can't help himself. He just like feels compelled to like go, just constantly be out there, like trying to make the next move. I mean, even the fact that he's calling into Howard Stern, it's like he's desperate to, get media attention, and I assume be able to translate that into some kind of added celebrity, which means added fame, etc. So he clearly is like a hungry guy.
Right. Yeah, he can't turn it off, right? Because like even after, I mean, the way the movie ends is he's in witness protection, and the ending note of the movie is just how awful it is to just have to be a regular person now, and instead of living this gangster lifestyle.
Yeah, that's true.
That he can't get, that he ordered pasta and they gave him, spaghetti and ketchup, whatever there was they said.
Noodles and ketchup.
Noodles and ketchup. Okay. Yeah. But then clearly it's not like this part of his personality was ever turned off. I mean, there's a reason he's messing up in witness protection. There's a reason that he's cooperating with the movie, which is an objectively very stupid thing to do. Like if you'd think that anything that somebody in his position could do to keep a lower profile, is something that you should do. It's kind of a miracle that he never had like the real life equivalent of the college episode of The Sopranos where the ex-mob guy, ends up getting whacked by Tony. That never happened to him, but you just had to keep pushing. So I guess Micah's Midwestern values lesson there maybe applies, but yeah, I want to wrap for today. I would love.
Before we wrap, though, can I just say one thing? Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you when you're trying to wrap, but we have been talking about all the male characters in this movie who are great, but we have not really said anything about Karen, who to me, part of what's amazing about this movie is that it's just so jam packed with people, and none of them really feel like supporting actors in the classical sense, that they're there to just as a foil for or to show the XYZ about the main character. It's like all of them have like their own moment in the sun, and that's definitely true of Karen. Like, to me, she's one of the most compelling figures in the whole movie. It would have been so easy to portray her as innocent. She's the mob wife, but she's innocent and she doesn't really know what's going on, but she's like really has this spunk to her where she's like gets in that a great scene near the beginning where she gets in the fight at the cab stand after he stands her up. But then at the end when she's like
she stands up for herself in that scene.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
she, what I mean? He's probably like a pretty intimidating guy, even though if you don't exactly know what he does, right. And she still, confronts him.
And the fact that her character says openly that she was like turned on by that whole dynamic. Like,
totally. Yeah.
And at the end, you see her in the exact same situation as Henry. Literally, I mean, they're like running around town together. She's also like asking for a bump of coke when she's at somebody's house. I forget whose, but she's just absolutely fantastic in the movie.
I love that line from the Beansy character or the guy that played Beansy's goes, "You want to see helicopters? Woo!"
Yeah, no, that's right. Like, she goes from like being like, she's willing to go toe to toe with him when they first meet. She's she's very open about in the voiceover about how turned on she is by all of it. When she sticks a gun in his face when she finds out about his mistress, and they stay together after that. Because she's like, oh well, I still loved him. I mean, why should she have him? And then by the end, she is literally his partner in crime. That they're running drugs together. Although she kind of tries to fall back on the mob wife thing at the very end, He was like, "Look, what do I know? I don't know anything. You know, this is Henry's world." And you know,
and that's the scene with the guy that actually busts them.
Yeah,
where he's like, "Come on, don't give me the babe in the woods routine."
Yeah, you're on. Like, we have you on tape talking about all this stuff repeatedly. Like I know how deeply involved you are. Absolutely.
In the scenes where the two of them are going back and forth, including like the scene where he's asking her where the bag of Coke is and she says that she flushed it down the toilet, like that doesn't feel like a movie to me when I'm watching that. Like that is so the interplay between the two of them, the sort of like raw emotion and like sense of desperation that you get between the two of them, just feels like you're tuning into a real life scene of something. You know, it's extremely powerful stuff because they're both desperate. They both know that they're I mean, she had no choice but to do that, but the fact that she did that means that he's saying, oh, they wouldn't have found the Coke. It's like, what are you talking about? Of course they would have found the Coke. But it's just like the palpable sense of desperation between the two of them is so good.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
She also has the, you know, her voiceover, you know, when they're first married, where she's like, you know, everything starts to feel normal. Like it starts to feel like, you know, everybody else is just lazy because they're not doing this and they're just, you know, waiting for handouts, and he's actually going above and beyond. And it's like the mental gymnastics, even if you're not from that world, that you have to go through to justify this stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, look,
and that's actually when she says our husbands were working class guys. She goes, so that's the only time I think working class is mentioned. So it's kind of interesting.
That is interesting. Although he does also, when he first they go out in their first like date on their own, he tells her that what he does for a living is that he's a union representative.
Right.
Yeah. Which he legitimately was, the actual Henry Hill. I guess that was his like job, his fake job title was
his make work. Yeah, no show job.
Yeah. Yeah,
but that scene's actually kind of funny because he says, "I'm in construction." She's like, "I don't feel like you're in construction." It's like, well, I'm a union delegate, meaning like everybody wants to get on this good side to get, you know.
Right. Yeah, if it wasn't obvious yet, surely by the end of the night, you know, she'd put two and two together.
Oh,
yeah. No, it's so good. There's so much we could talk about here, but I am actually serious about this. I will read Wise Guy to do a follow up if.
The audiobook's only 7 hours apparently.
Wow.
I saw it yesterday.
It's on Audible.
I assume it probably is. I saw it on like Scribd or something, but
okay. Yeah, no, like I said, I'd totally read Wise Guy to do a follow up. I think that'd be fun. I don't know. I feel like Forrest would do that. And Daniel has already read it. I think it's kind of 50-50 whether I can get Micah to do it, but.
I'm enticed. Yeah,
let's.
I mean, there's so much to say, especially with what you were saying, Danny, about like the stuff that's not in the movie that the ties between, you know, the military and everything else. I mean, and also this is such a rich vein to tap generally because it offers so much discussion about so much, like whether it's the mob in the U.S. or the mob in Italy or anything. I mean, and the way that it's portrayed as this in this romantic. Glaze by people like Scorsese when the truth is pretty far from that. I mean, this is really, there's a reason why there are so many like mob movies out there, but they're also, you know, we've published stuff in Jacobin, a sort of like left analysis of the mafia in southern Italy.
Look, we'll all read Wise Guy, and then Danny and I'll write a book review for you for Jacobin.
Oh, perfect. No, mwah.
All right. Nice. All right. I'm going to cut it there for today, but I think we did just decide. We will do a sequel, which is going to be a lot of fun. Also, as a general reminder, appropriately enough, considering what this was, we are going to be the next Monday. There's no regular episode, you know, because on that Christmas to New Year's kind of break. But we already pre-recorded with Nando Vila, Big Waz, and Mike Racine the next Sopranos recap bonus episode. So that's going to air at the usual time on Mondays. And at 7:30, and also I believe on Sunday I'm going to continue the debate watching live stream series. It's supposed to be that me and Bhaskar Sankar are going to watch the Michael Harrington, William F. Buckley firing line thing. Bhaskar tells me that he's where he is, the internet is iffy, so it's possible that I'll have to be rescheduled, but I think that's going on Sunday. Sopranos recap for sure in the new year. So Monday after next, the show is going to be back for real. It's now going to be live on Mondays, the time that it was premiering at 7:30 Eastern. Forrest is going to have more screen time as the producer. And the first guest is going to be Richard Wolff, so that should be a lot of fun. See everybody then. Otherwise, left is best.